Yes, the Abbey Wall. There's an amazing remains of a monastery behind the art gallery called St Mary's Abbey, and this turned at a right angle, this wall, and it cut through the square, and it was built in the 13th century when the medieval city wall was started. Well, this is the biggest missing section of the city wall on the right, 125 yards, 360 feet, which I think is right, because I'm doing functional maths, basic maths at Wakefield College. Cat statue on the right, hidden behind a black lantern, put there by a student in the early 1980s. We don't know why exactly, but the cat statues you find started with Tom Adams in 1979, began to put black cats on buildings that he designed, influenced by Terence Cuneo, the railway painter, and supposedly Leonardo da Vinci that did the same. He used to put mice in his drawings. So there's 29 to find in total. Black bricked up windows on the right start appearing in 1697. William III introduced a tax on daylight. It was all to deal with the clippage of coinage, when people would shave silver, sometimes gold, off the side of coins to melt down to make into bullion, or to save over time to make into new coins. So by 1747, any house that had more than 10 windows, you'd pay 4 shillings extra in tax, supposedly where the term daylight robbery comes from. This is one of York's 2 universities, Ripon and St John, or St John's University, opened in 1841 as a Church of England training school, 1 pupil for the first year it was open. But York's first university, the one at Heslington, 1963, really late for any major city to have a university. City walls on the right then were mentioned why they're quite small, but this is the most scenic part. And from here on the right, you might want to take a photograph. Is the Great East Window of York Minster, the largest church window in Europe, the size of a tennis court, 78 feet in length, designed by the medieval glazier John Thornton of Coventry in 1408. Took him 2 years to complete his work. There's 311 panels, restored again in 2018 when it was relabeled England's Sistine Chapel. Just past the traffic lights, Monk Bar on the right, York's largest medieval gates. You may want to take a photograph. 63 feet in height. Conway and York are the only 2 places in Britain that have all of their original medieval entrances. The celebrated horse painter George Stubbs was born in Liverpool. Anybody from Liverpool? He was born in McGull and studied anatomy on the right at the old county hospital. Big collection of buildings coming into view. He was in York in the 1740s before leaving for London, where he painted Whistle Jacket, a prancing horse, now on display at the National Portrait Gallery, Britain's most celebrated portrait painter. And if you look to the left, you might want to take a photograph here. It's a reconstruction of an Elizabethan knot garden opposite the post box. Cuttings and shrubs brought by explorers from abroad were intertwined together to give the form of a knot. There it is on the left. Instead of planting herbs and remedies, a necessity in the Middle Ages when monasteries were the early hospitals. So gardening is one of the biggest pastimes in Britain today, probably because of the Elizabethans. Far more popular than binge drinking or bingo. The road in front leads to Stamford Bridge in East Yorkshire, a village 8 miles from here, where Harald Hardrada, the Norwegian king, was defeated by Harold II, the last Saxon king of England. 3 weeks later he died at Hastings. It's the start of the Norman period in England, but it isn't the end of the Viking period in York. Danish Vikings with English nobles ransacked York in 1069, killed 3,000 Normans, biggest defeat they suffered in the entire conquest. They kept attacking the coast of England until the 1150s under the reign of King Stephen, an almost forgotten part of English history, because the Danes had a claim to the English crown. Ransacked York in 1075, planned another raid 1086. On the right, one of many medieval cemeteries discovered in York. 1982, workmen laid out the foundations for the car park of the old Sainsbury's supermarket, came across skeletons in simple wooden coffins without grave goods, not buried in the haphazard way that medieval Christian cemeteries were laid out in. It's one of 10 medieval Jewish cemeteries in England. The dig was stopped halfway through. 500 plus burials were discovered, but it was never fully recorded. So under the multi-storey car park on the right, there's around 300 to 400 burials waiting to be found. The Jews first arrived in England with the Normans in 1070, escaping persecution at the time in Spain and Portugal. Forced to take their dead back to London for burial till 1177. That's when Henry II granted permission for the Jews in England to have cemeteries in medieval centres like Ipswich, major international port, 1300s, you wouldn't think it, Wisbech, King's Lynn, medieval Jewish cemeteries in Leicester, Northampton, forgotten medieval centres, and of course York, the second city in England till about the Wars of the Roses, the 1480s. But York has at least inside its city walls 500,000 skeletons. In 49 medieval parish churchyards like St Cuthbert's on the right, there's an average of 10,000 skeletons each. That's because the Romans were here for 339 years, not in medieval rivals like Bristol or Norwich. The Vikings weren't in Edinburgh, Bristol or Cardiff, and only Windsor in London and Chester. But 8,000 Vikings lived here by the Battle of Hastings. By the Middle Ages, 17,000 people, 50,000 in London. And with 500,000 skeletons inside the walls, is that why York's also the most haunted city in Britain, with 140 ghosts and 504 hauntings. Possibly the most haunted city in Europe. For me, it's Norwich. On the left-hand side, the Black Swan. This has got 10 ghosts inside it. Pair of legs runs up and down a staircase. Cursed pipe mounted on the wall. Bloke who stands at the bar. Grumpy old bloke with he's got a timepiece. Looks at waiting. It's like he's waiting for a meeting. It's never going to happen. Disappears and comes back and does exactly the same thing 3 days later. Now, the next stop is number 6 for the Shambles, associated with Harry Potter. But the author J.K. Rowling has never been to York. People forget she went to university in Exeter, which probably has a bigger claim to York for Harry Potter than. But it's all about the butchers. There's a Shambles in Liverpool, Manchester, Omagh, Sheffield, Chesterfield, Worcester. So the fish market, the fish shambles like the one in Plymouth. Meat market for the Shambles. There it is on the right. This is stop number 6. Muchas gracias.
Gracias.
Adios, vamos Dios.
Gracias. Usted también.
Okay, thank you very much. Come on.
That was excellent.
When you see somebody, let them on your pen. We'll extend the ticket all day. Okay, tomorrow. Just come back to Exhibition Square at some point. Okay, adios.
Yes, gracias.
Now the word shambles comes from the Old English word spoken by the Anglo-Saxons. It came from northern Germany, modern day Denmark in the 5th century. Scammell's the name of a table, and the flesh that was placed on it, flesh Scammell Street, gets abbreviated to Shambles around 1420. But previously known as Haymungergate. Hares used to feed the animals brought there for slaughter, because the Danish Vikings were here, and their language, Old Norse, gets overlaid over the Old English and results in dialect words forming, still in the Yorkshire dialect today. Lug for an ear, Dale for a valley, Beck for a stream. Yorkshire and Cumbrian are the second oldest dialects in England. Scouse, it's a Norwegian dish, but it's a modern dialect. Got bits of Welsh in it, but it's mainly a West Lancashire dialect, but it has the Irish language overlaid over it during the potato famine in the 1840s. So it explains the difference in dialect of Manchester to say like Preston. West Lancashire, you've got the Norse or the Norwegians. Manchester with Danish Vikings. Slightly different in dialect. And you've got the Irish influence in Birmingham. Companies completely separated from Birmingham by geography. Yardley area till 1910 stayed largely agricultural. Bordering Leicester where the Vikings were. It's fascinating, all this thing. I could go on for ages, but I would. Anyway. So the Shambles there, Haymungergate. Hay used to feed the animals. Gat is the Danish name, is the Norwegian name for a street. Gel in Danish translates into English as gate. 35 Norse gates, not Saxon streets. So Shambles is where the butchery industry was established by the Normans. Sold from the shelves or placed on hooks under the overhangs of the shop fronts, the jetties, and it stopped the direct sunlight from spoiling them. The jetties began to appear from about the 14th century, when houses were built vertically, not horizontally. There's a lack of space in medieval towns and cities defended by ditches and ramparts, so they built this way to deal with that problem. The jetties are at the 2nd story level, and a lot of the shop fronts date from the 20th century, but it's the buildings behind that are older, 1400s, and that's where the slaughterhouses were. The butchery industry declines on the Shambles in the 1930s. Abattoirs become more widespread, and the last butcher shop was Dewhurst, 1992. Have a look on the left, above the fleece there's a white cat statue coming out of the wall. That's the ghost cat. That's York's most haunted pub. 15 ghosts, well 14 because we like to be accurate. Geoffrey Monroe, the Canadian pilot, died in room number 4 in World War II, and the lady from California claims the ghost followed it across the Atlantic Ocean. It hasn't been seen there since she left about 15 years ago. Do you want me to get a quick photograph here?
Yeah.
Oh, I managed to get it. Well, there you go. Now, you had to be a member of a guild, a special group of people to work in a skilled industry like butchery or shoemaking or barrel making from the Middle Ages. And the butchers looked after the quality of the meats. And All Saints Payment is the Guild Church of York. The best thing about that church, it's got some of the best stained glass in York from the Middle Ages. York and its churches has 80% of the medieval glass in Britain. And if you go inside that church, it's technically free. So you just put what you want in the donation box. The Minster's £20 to get in. It's the most popular attraction, but not everybody wants to pay that. So you've got another one. You've got another one nearby, Holy Trinity, where Anne Lister, Gentleman Jack fame, was married to Anne Walker, 1834. Late Middle Ages, that church. Rare box pews, 17th to the 19th century. Christmas market, obviously, on the right.
Yeah. Right, yo.
What?
What's the route?
What's the route?
Christmas came early to me. Some of them beat Newcastle. And there's not a pub in York for every day of the year. What a load of rubbish. Where does it come from? Norwich, 1930s. They claimed at the time in some sort of publicity material to have a church for every Sunday, a monastery for every month. Norwich does have a church for every Sunday. It still has the most in Europe, 31. It's also got the football team relegated from the English Premier League on the most occasions, 6. This pub, the 3 Tons, is one of the best independent pubs. Got Thatcher's Blood Orange cider on tap. 7th oldest pub, but the 4th oldest, the Blue Boar, a little bit more added history. It's here on the left, on Castlegate. You'll see it where it's where Dick Turpin's corpse is laid out, executed for horse theft in 1739 in York. And then his corpse got stolen from another location by body snatchers, because York is 3 days from Edinburgh by stagecoach. Surgeons there would pay 2.5 months' salary to men to take corpses out of the ground, and the only ones legally available for dissection were executed criminals. But luckily for Turpin, his corpse was rescued by his friends. Think of Burke and Hare.
Yep.
Hare disappears near Annan, but they were recorded in Newcastle. If they're in Newcastle, they must have been in Berwick. But he was last seen around Dumfries. Quite interesting. Annan's got a great Robert Bruce castle. What's left is the mound. One of the many forgotten castles. The forgotten castle and the best one for me is Beagles. This is stop number 7. Got loads of the attraction. You saw the dungeon, you get 30% off of your ticket, 15% off of the castle, 25% off of the art museum, lots of other discounts as well. Start with the beginning, and then that's why I try and do a timeline, which is how tabloid style is. Could be more, we don't know. There's a lot of what ifs about York. I'll try and stick with the facts and what we know about. But the trouble is, a history book from the 1990s is saying like there's something called the Multangular Tower. I don't know if you've come across that. Best standing room. It says 300 AD on the plaque. There's some of the lead archaeologists think it's 300 AD. It says things have improved like the archaeology and stuff like that. Now this is, you can see on the left hand side of the Crown Court buildings replaces the west wall. If you want a really good photograph of the castle, look at an angle of 2 o'clock on the left, because opposite the traffic lights is the South Gatehouse, and you see how the drawbridge pit was set slightly in front. One reason I mention other places is it's alright to say York's got that longest walled circuit. I mentioned Norwich, which did have the longest wall. We'll do that later. So people can compare and contrast the bids. So there's the South Gatehouse drawbridge bit, ripped up when it becomes the county jail, east-west wall, and opposite one is 786 Wetherspoons in Britain. Not the poshest, that's Bury St Edmunds, not the biggest, Ramsgate in Kent, not the one with the best carpets, the Imperial in Exeter, but called the Poston Gate, from the French word poston, that means end, or to be more precise, Anglo-Norman. a rural dialect. There's the postern gate itself on the right. So the Normans actually bequeathed 10,000 words to modern English. Standard French makes up 30% of modern English today. Postern tower, postern gate, edge of a wall fortification means end, defending an isolated stretch of wall, because a third of York was defended by water, never fully enclosed by a medieval city wall. Have you come very far yourself?
I've come from Montenegro.
Right. Well, originally.
Originally from Woking, sorry.
Right. So London's biggest cemetery is Brookwood near Woking.
Yeah.
So not many people realise things
huge.
like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it is London's biggest cemetery. So there on the left, Dick Turpin's grave, upright gravestone at the far end of the cemetery, buried with a horse Black Bess that he rode from London, rubbish, ridden by a highwayman called John Nevison from Sheffield, 1676. He robbed a traveller at Gadshill in Kent, and after a 200-mile dash here to York overnight, came across the Lord Mayor playing bowls, shook hands with him to establish an alibi for the crime in Kent. 10 years later was arrested in Wakefield, brought to York for trial. He's only here, the county seat. He's executed here in Everson. So was Turpin 60 years later. And both their stories get mixed together in a book called Rookwood, published in 1834. It's the only reason we know anything about Turpin and his life. There's a classic example. Everybody believes that story. But I broke it down into little segments, so I'll do Turpin's story in 4 different sections. Walmgate on the left are some of the best independent restaurants and pubs in York. Blue Bell, smallest pub in York, complete Edwardian interior, 1903, where York City Football Club was founded in 1922. Polish Blue Barbican restaurant, Korean, Japanese, Argentinian steakhouse, superb, Ambiente, tapas, fantastic, all independent. Bottom end of the street suffered from slum clearances, 20th century. You've got the white building on the right, Bose Morel House. It's an old vicarage from the 1390s. It served 6 churches, only 2 survive. But at the bottom of the street, this is stop number 9, is the most important medieval building in York for me, the Barbican, attached to that central arch, which is Norman, 1100s. It means the barrier, to obstruct. You can see where bar comes from. You can see how the French influences modern English. The 14th century Barbican is an early form of passport control, used to trap enemy troops inside during a siege. Portcullis beneath the central arch, 2 14th century oak doors. There was an iron gate on the front. Enemy troops would have boiling urine and sand poured onto them rather than oil. Oil was too expensive in the Middle Ages. You see that happening in movies, it's not accurate. I'm using the word movie because I cannot say film properly. The white building, open tomorrow, is a cafe. You wouldn't think it. It's full of house in this area. It's not. It's full of history. Walmgate. That cafe's an old Elizabethan prison, 1570s, running by an independent church group, run by a church group independently, Calvary Church. They're at services today. So if you go inside, you can sit upstairs. You wouldn't think it, would you? You wouldn't think it's a cafe, would you? 25 minutes walk from the Shambles. I'm not on commission, by the way. We're in Yorkshire. They don't pay that yet. It's amazing. I want you to see this. Fantastic. The Barbican is the only one attached to a city wall in Britain. You've got them on castles, but on city walls, this is the only place in Britain. There's one other example in Europe, Krakow in Poland. We're going to turn right here. It projects 44 feet from the front of the entrance. If you possibly
Sì,
can over there.
viene
Look up here. Which part of Lancashire? Oh, right, okay. Charlotte Bronte started Jane Eyre in Manchester, the first couple of chapters. She took her father for a cataract operation there, probably around Deansgate. Ditch filled in, cattle built, held in pens across the ditch. There was a cattle market here, 1820 till 1970. It's only the disproportionate number of pubs like the old Spotted Cow on the left, the Chinese restaurant, they give a telltale sign. There was a cattle market here. Banks had branches here. And by the 1850s, it was the ward of Joseph Rowntree. It was concerned about the local inhabitants because pens had been built across Paragon Street on the left-hand side here where the Barbican Centre is, room for 7,000 animals. He wants to get rid of the walls to improve sanitation. He wants to build better housing. It means removing the earth rampart. But visitors were coming from North America to see York's Gothic features. The walls were still intact, and most of the council had joined an antiquity society. So this section of the wall had been removed Chester would now be the second longest walled circuit. But you know what? Chester's gates were rebuilt in the classical style in the 18th century. So Conway and Carnarvon really are the only two places in Britain that compete with York for completeness of its medieval defences. But for length, it's York, Chester, then Southampton out of the top 3 of 108 medieval walled towns and cities in Britain. The most famous person in York is probably Guy Fawkes. For me, it has to be John Barry, the composer. You guys you'll have on tomorrow might mention Dame Judi Dench, but it's John Barry for me, who began his career at the Rialto Cinema, now student housing in front, in 1957. This is where the John Barry 7 was for. Then went on to work with Adam Faith in his first movie, Beat Girl, 1960. 2 years later, co-wrote one of the first of 11 James Bond themes, Dr. No. His last one's A Living Daylights. He went on to win a Grammy for Midnight Cowboy, but the opening song by Harry Nilsson, Everybody's Talking, should have been Lay Lady Lay by Bob Dylan, got rejected by the producers and wins 5 Oscars for Born Free, Out of Africa, Dances with Wolves and A Lion in the Winter. The Edinburgh Arms pub have gone past. The Beatles stayed there once, performing at the Rialto 4 times, all in 1963. Second gig on the tour bus leaving York for Shrewsbury. John Lennon and Paul McCartney wrote the lyrics from Me to You, that first UK #1 hit single in Britain. And on the left, the Masons' Arms. Tudor-Vithian architecture, Brewers Tudor pubs are built in this style in the pre-war years. Romanticised view of Elizabethan England. It's Beer Terrace on the left. If you want a photograph, overlooks the 2 rivers meeting together, the Foss and the River Ouse. Very few places in Britain have more than one river. Aberdeen, Scotland, Chepstow, Wales, and the Ouse is 57 miles long. It means clear water in the Anglo-Saxon tongue. That's where there's other rivers with the same name. York's incredibly flat. It's 72 miles away from the North Sea. So when all that water comes off the North York's moors, it simply spreads out when it gets here, because it has nowhere to go to. Do you want to hear it in the oldest dialect in England, Northumbrian? It's got nowhere to ganty. The car park on the left and the grass area to the right were both under 17 feet, 3 inches of water in the Boxing Day deluge of 2015. But the biggest flood ever arguably recorded by the flood marker on the right in the King's Arms pub, the white building, 17 feet 8 inches, that was 2000. Apart from London and Thetford, York was the only other place in England that had more than one castle. There's the second castle on the right, Bale Hill, built in wood and turf in 1069. William the Conqueror wants to control the north, he needs to control York. This castle was abandoned in 1270, never rebuilt in stone, and becomes part of the city's defences, as you can see on the right, when the medieval wall is built across the Bailey in the 1300s. And this is well worth exploring, Bishopthorpe Road, the Swan pub and its pre-war interior on the left from the 1930s, quite rare. Snug inside part of its layout. And this is stop number 12. This was voted Britain's best high street in 2015. One of the best, it won 200 out of 230 other entries, won the overall winners winner of the High Street of the Air Awards. 2014 the Tour de France went through, yeah. Bunting was placed across the street and 10,000 people came to see the cyclists leave the grander part of the nearby racecourse. It was then relabelled the Notting Hill area of York. Never seen Julia Roberts buying a lottery ticket in Sainsbury's, but come and explore York's first community-run pub nearby, Golden Balls, where Charles Dickens would drink. His brother Alfred worked on the railways here with the man Richard Chicken. The character Mr. Mitterbow is based on David Copperfield. Next stop is number 13. Have a look on the left. Small alleyway is a holiday that fits 2 people, but it's also York's smallest house. 76A Bishopthorpe Road. You're going to come back to York, look, it's staying there. It's part of an old doctor's surgery, but nobody knows who designed it, who came up with the idea. Right, we've all got on the horizon the old Terry's factory. Chocolate and railways were York's big industries in the 20th century. We're going to cover chocolate now. And in Rowntree still has a factory here. And Rowntree's nearly merged with Cadbury's of Birmingham in the 1930s, who dominated the chocolate markets. Cadbury's Dairy Milk was the biggest selling chocolate bar of the single market. A box chocolates was the preserve of the rich and cost £300 each. The boxes were handmade and so were the chocolates. George Harris was then appointed head of publicity when Rowntree's were going to merge with Cadbury's. Didn't do advertising until he joined the company, and he uses American marketing techniques for the first time in Britain to launch Black Magic onto a brand new market, the working classes. So Black Magic really helped keep Rowntree's in business. Consumer research revealed that men at the time would buy boxes of chocolates for women as a form of marriage proposal, but the men were more interested in what was in the box than on the outside of it. Chocolates cost £300 at the time. Boxes are handcrafted, chocolates handmade. And it went on to persuade Harris to do taste tests for the working classes to find suitable flavours that would work for their palates. 12 were chosen: cherry cup, hazelnut, cluster. To go with the 12 flavours, brand advertising, black box, white lettering, cost £5 to buy using cheaper materials, not £300, and it worked. He went on to sell millions of boxes of Black Magic and rebranded other products that were struggling to sell in large volumes. In the late 30s, aerated chocolate gets a new texture and becomes Aero, early rival to Cadbury's Dairy Milk. Rowntree's chocolate beans around since 1882 gets a circular tube 4 colours and becomes Smarties, and Rowntree's chocolate crisp simply becomes Kit Kat, the 4th biggest selling chocolate bar in the world at the minute. Number 1 at the minute is Snickers. Was that interesting enough?
Was it
Right.
still used as a marriage proposal when it went down to the working class?
I don't know. I'd have to check on that. Right, consumer research. I've just carried out consumer research and I found you're interested in chocolate. So I might as well date Terry's, as it's on the left. This is the old Terry's factory. Gold aluminium lining and luxury apartments that replaced many original buildings. Reminds people Terry's old gold was made here. Spartan range of chocolates, Neapolitans, Terry's Moonlight. But the first product made here when the factory opened in 1926. Are we all right for this stop, please, Sean? Thanks very much, mate. Much appreciated. Was an apple version of chocolate orange, made here until 1952, but only ceased production because rationing was still in place in Britain after the Second World War, which Cadbury's managed to get around because they had their own milk processing plant. 60 million chocolate oranges went on to be made here. 44 million now made in Strasbourg in France. Made in France but not sold there. The company deemed it cheaper to produce the products in other parts of the globe, so they closed the factory in 2005. So there were 5 buildings. The only one that survives is the red brick one on the left. The clock tower is part of the water tower and offices itself, and the company has its name on all 4 faces. Not numbers but letters that spell Terry York. Designed like that deliberately so you can see it from every angle of the race course. It increased sales on a race day. So 2,500 people once employed there. Nursing home, social housing now. Great building in front, a restaurant, a liquor store. Rums imported from America. Store there uses one of the fillings of the truffles of Terry's Old Gold. Discontinued 2012. Luxury apartments in front, some of which start at 300,000. That's why I live in Wakefield, not in York. 2,500 people once worked here. 4,000 plus at Rowntree's. This course from the 16th century is Chester. Newmarket, I think, is the second oldest. York is the third. Oldest course in Scotland, Kelso. York Racecourse rescued the city from stagnation. It was the second city till the Wars of the Roses and lost all of its status when Henry VIII got his hands on its churches and abbeys. Bristol and Norwich have become the most important provincial towns. York then became the playground of the rich, whereas other medieval centres declined, Ipswich, Northampton, Coventry for example. And the gentry and ladies were spending money on pleasure, not on defence at the end of the English Civil War. So came here for card games and dancing from London in an evening, racing in an afternoon, and heading to other social centres nearby like Bath. So 18 racing festivals are held here at one of the most prestigious race courses in Britain. The August Ebor is one of the 5 major festivals. Ascot's been held here, St Leger, Gimcraft meeting 1845, attracted 150,000, but the biggest attendance ever, Pope John Paul II giving open air mass in 1982 to just under 200,000 people. Called the Knavesmire, corruption of the Scandinavian personal name. No, there's an area set aside to the left for public hangings, the Tyburn. There's the raised platform in the trees on the left, named after the tributary that ran into the River Thames, which I read in the Daily Star. That's where Dick Turpin was executed for horse theft in 1739, a member of a vicious gang of housebreakers on the fringes of London. When the gang was rounded up, he escaped up to Yorkshire and settled in Brough near Hull, where he made a living stealing horses. He took on the name John Palmer to avoid detection. He was accused of horse theft by a neighbour, sent over to York for trial, and from his prison cell at the Castle Museum wrote to his brother back in Essex, again financial assistance. His brother wouldn't pay for the stamp The handwriting was recognised by his former schoolmaster. That's how Turpin was identified. And his schoolmaster comes up from Thaxted or Hempstead, where Turpin was born, and identified Turpin. So his brother had no idea who Palmer was. Turpin jumped from the ladder, should have been kicked away. He climbed into the scaffold, the three-legged mare, the nickname for the tripod. The ladder should have been kicked away by the hangman Thomas Hadfield, a convicted felon, offered the opportunity to gain his freedom. That's what happened in the 18th century. It's also when two men were employed to pull on the victim's legs to make sure their neck was stretched fully. One explanation of where the term pulling your leg comes from. Something you don't think of, innit? A bit like the first Scouser to have the #1 hit single. Rita Loza, How Much Is That Doggy in the Window in 1953. For some odd reason, people from Manchester love that one. This is the biggest concentration of Roman burials in York, and it's stop 16. Off to the right at Cul-de-sac, Trentholme Drive, 342 Roman skeletons discovered there in the 1950s, after kids had been playing on rough ground at the end of the street and found a human skull and bones and took them to the Yorkshire Museum. First formal excavation of a Roman cemetery in York, one that wasn't instigated by building work. The sudden rise in this road is because it's a man-made Civil War fort called a sconce, about a third of the size of the Queen's Sconce in Newark. It's a quadrilateral with angled bastions, and royalist troops dug out 10,000 Roman skeletons from the ground and threw them back into the ramparts, where they were rediscovered in the 18th century. But the most unusual Roman cemetery found so far is just past the Elmbank Hotel, where the best example of Art Nouveau in Britain is, according to Sir John Betjeman, contemporary of Remy Mackintosh designed it. There behind the white building is Driffield Terrace, and in two gardens in 2004-05, workmen were landscaping and came across human remains, 82 male and 1 female Roman skeleton. The male skeletons were all under 45, they'd all suffered battle trauma, stab wounds from swords and spears. 47 had been decapitated, and one had a massive carnivore bite. A leopard or tiger had taken a chunk out of his pelvis. And archaeologists believe, I cannot believe I pronounced that word correctly for a change, that it's Europe's best preserved gladiator cemetery. There's an arena here somewhere where the games were held, Colosseum, but nobody's certain where. There's only 3% of Roman York or less has been excavated. The single female skeleton found, a suspected female gladiator, and the only evidence to back up that theory, the carnivore bite on one of the males. She's almost forgotten about. So houses built here in the 1820s, skeletons were found, grave goods, but stuff wasn't recorded properly. There was no systematic procedure in place to record a historical find, so lots of evidence about York's Roman past was lost. Now, is anybody from the West Midlands? Perry Bar was the very first Odeon cinema in Britain. Not many in Scotland, where ABC dominated. Ayres, the finest north of the border. 3 major chains in the 30s, the golden era of Hollywood: Gaumont, ABC, and Oscar Deutsch's Odeon. Oscar Deutsch made sure that each one had different features: fins on towers, curved frontages, flat slabs, to stand out from the competition, and it worked, because there's 258 Odeons stood out in the British public consciousness for these different design features, and only 2 were similar in style: Harrogate, Sutton Coldfield. And more than half are in the modern style, the Art Deco style as well. York Odeon, now the Everyman on the left, which has got a Spielberger restaurant and cocktail bar, was the one of 2 built in brown brick. It's modelled on the one in Chester, because they couldn't get permission to build inside a historic court, so it's to blend in with the buildings around it. But this is the only one in Britain that has its original Art Deco cinema sign. You can see it on the left. It stood for Oscar Deutsch Entertained Our Nation. That's according to the publicity department from the company. So it's one of 2 Art Deco buildings left in York. Micklegate Bar in front is the nearest entrance to the City of London. And touching the state sword, the ceremony introduced in the reign of Richard II in the 1380s, was still in place when Charles III came for his visit a few years ago. It meant that the Lord Mayor would greet with a state sword outside the city walls, and the visiting royalty would have to gain permission from the Lord Mayor to enter the city walls, which happened with James I of England. I'll do this one for you when you're from Scotland. This happened with James I of England, James VI of Scotland, coming from Edinburgh in 1603 to become king, after the death of Elizabeth I, and he insisted that Scotland's emblem, the Red Lion, appear on every major English building, which is why the Red Lion is the most popular pub name in Britain, with just over 1,000 in existence. Is that alright?
I'd say sixth and first.
You say what, sorry?
I'd say it's James sixth and first.
Is it, have I got that wrong? James the first, James the sixth.
But he was ours first. So sixth and
Oh,
first.
okay, yeah. Oh yeah, yeah, but all you Well, you have got the second best open top bus in Britain, Glasgow. You get 10% discount. And probably the second friendliest city in Britain, Glasgow, is it Liverpool? I can't remember. You argue that between yourselves, Newcastle first. Yeah, but that's where...
Having lived in both.
I think it's got 1,000. We're alright so far. Now, sorry about this, I've got to do the railways. It's not everybody's cup of tea, I'll try and make it interesting. So from this car park on the left is Queen Street, and it's where George Hudson, this is stop 19 by the way, next stop Railway Museum, number 20. Queen Street is where George Hudson, the Lord Mayor in the 1830s, built a line to Leeds to bring in cheap coal to boost the city's economy. Because York had more people employed in domestic service, hello there, in the 1830s than any other industry. Remind me to put on your tickets, right?
Yeah.
Okay. More people in domestic service than any other industry. But a chance meeting with the railway engineer George Stephenson, building a line from Derby to Leeds, persuaded Hudson to connect with his line further south at Normanton in West Yorkshire, but changes were made to Leeds or London. London was 14 hours away by train. You come in the opposite direction from London. I can't remember where it is. It's either near Belgium or France, but I can't remember which one. Coming in the opposite direction with tourists coming to see the newly opened Theatre Royal. So York ends up being a massive tourist hotspot and the railway hub in the north of England. Completely unexpected. It's linked to London before Canterbury. After the first passenger railway opened in the world, the Swansea Mumbles, 1808. Horse-drawn, but it's a passenger railway. There was no national plan to link the major centres together in Britain like there was in Europe where the governments took charge. So when this station opened, the first permanent station, 1841, that's what the arches are for, access. York London was one of the first intercity railways in the world. What would have happened is anybody from Lincolnshire today. So Lincoln's probably the city nearest to York for history. Probably after that it's Chester, but it's got 6 services to London. It's one of the first cities to propose a line south to London through Cambridge, 1821. 6 services today. York's got one every half an hour. So in 1965, partly because of its isolation, the flat season was started at Lincoln, the Lincoln Handicap, and it's now at Doncaster, which, like York, is on the East Coast Main Line. So York gets far more visitors and more money invested in its economy because it's 2 hours from London. Something you don't think of, isn't it? Like Tom Selleck offered the role of Indiana Jones, couldn't get out of his contract with Magnum. Olivia Newton-John, no way, she was 17 when she played Sandy in Grease, 29 in real life. That's movie history. First curry restaurant in Britain, 1808, Hindustani Coffee House, Portman Square, London. Curry's a Portuguese phrase in India before the British. Food history. So to make railway history more interesting, let's use subjects like football and crime and stuff like that, instead of talking about the Flying Scotsman. So, for example, in Britain, football grounds were built near tube and railway stations for ease of access. Sinsel Bank, Portman Road, Main Road, Boundary Park, rugby union grounds like Moseley and Twickenham, as far away as possible to discourage the working classes from coming to watch the sport. But one of the best things about the Railway Museum, it's got an area called the Warehouse, North Shed, where there's 11,000 items, and by far the best story is the murder carriage. 3 murders were solved on Britain's railways by 1901. There's a replica of this carriage built for a trial to cross-examine a surviving witness. It was simply because there weren't any corridors, not until 1892. So if you found a body by the track, how could you prove it was a railway murder? All that Miss Marple stuff's exaggerated, the murders on trains all the time. Because only 3 were solved by 1901. Little things like that that you don't think of. So when it comes to railway history, the Warehouse, the North Shed, is the best area for all that social stuff. You've got the Mallard in there, the Japanese bullet train, but Evening Star is probably the best engine. The last one built for British Railways in 1960. Only ran for 5 years, complete waste, but it was one of the best examples of British railway engineering. Even 2 years before it was built, they decided to preserve it. We all right so far?
Do you think of the Railway Museum then?
Yeah, good. Yeah, it was good.
En weer de goede banken aan voor het meer. Maar het is
Yeah,
bruin
not
en dan
used
voor
to
de
the
keer.
School of Music.
Ja.
Not all the school of Music.
I couldn't understand why the kids came to the transit on the
There's a
back.
big group of people that could walk into it.
It was tough.
Maybe.
I've not done the taxi one, but the guys that have to go.
Maar wel blij dat we het gedaan hebben.
Ja. Zeker wel.
The top of my
Dus
list.
wij weten we waar we niet naar terug moeten. Dat het inderdaad wel een klein stukje is.
Gillingham, by the way, is the most featured place on Homes Under the Hammer from the early episodes. The Medway project, where we are. That's got loads of history. I only went there to see someone place Gillingham in Priestfield. But I went early enough to have a look around. Right, so cholera graveyard on the right. 4 outbreaks in the 19th century. Nobody knew how the disease was spread. So this is the first cemetery outside the city wall in York since the 12th century. London's answer was to get the railways involved to build London's biggest cemetery in Surrey. The Necropolis Railway ran from 1850 to 1940 on a 20-mile stretch of track towards Woking, where Brookwood accounted for 9% of London's dead. It's right by the canal as well, isn't it? There we are. Managed to fit Woking in again. So this is stop number 20, Railway Museum, if you hadn't guessed already.
Ik heb ook gereden met de auto. En dan
Hope I've made it a little bit more interesting. I think it's a fascinating subject. I mean, the best thing in there, if you've got the time, email the Railway Museum, see if they're doing tours of the archives. 8,500 posters mainly Art Deco. It's the same with London, Underground Museum. Frank Pick's Art Nouveau poster collection, fantastic. So it's straight through the tunnel, stay on the left, pigeons live on the right. You can link pigeons to railway history, it's that interesting. Before the Saturday sports papers, the pink and the green one carried football scores. Huddersfield Town fans, they used to take pigeons with them to games across England from the villages nearby on excursion trains to away fixtures and attached the score to the pigeon's leg at 15, 30, 45 minutes. When they flew back to the lofts in West Yorkshire, you'd find out the scores. James Mason was one of those fans perhaps. He was born in Huddersfield, where the Sex Pistols played their last gig in Britain. Anyway, back to York. So the city wall in front is the longest walled medieval circuit in Britain. So this is an example of how we're trying to do it differently. But it's originally Norwich. Norwich had longer walls than London and Southwark put together. In its haste to improve its city status, like countless other places, Hereford, with fragmented remains of its walls, Worcester, with a few above ground vestiges, the walls were seen as outmoded and a hindrance to expansion. But by 1808, Norwich had 2 medieval entrances left. Horse-drawn traffic would struggle to navigate those narrow passageways. So York embraces preservation. This section of wall on the right, from North Street Post to Micklegate Bar, first preserved 1831-32. 2 hours to walk the full length. Norwich has a quarter. That's how I used tabloid style. You can do it like that. So I fitted in all that in like small paragraphs. To get the point across why it's a lot of fun. A lot of people say it's a lot of fun, but people
Ja,
want to know
straks op
why,
1 wel hè.
how,
Gaan we terug uit hè.
that's how we do it. But we've got 2 other guides who are completely different, more tours than me, but none of them like they definitely went to that holiday. So churches on the right hand side, All Saints North Street, remains of a monastery, where there's an image of a man wearing spectacles in a stained glass window from 1420, again technically free. The remains of the monastery on the other side of the river Ouse in the grounds of the museum gardens, where Thor's teepee is part of the Christmas market. The monastery, the wealthiest in the north of England, dates back to 1080. That's like an alternative for the Minster if people want to go in. Not everybody wants to pay 20 quid. And in front is the Minster, the jewel in the city's crown. It took 252 years to build this church, and it's the 5th one on this site. Work started in 1220 and it was finished in 1472. Minster is the Saxon name for a mission church. Cathedra, seat of the Archbishop. It's both, unlike Canterbury. Canterbury's just a cathedra. It's a bit confusing to be honest.
But they would take the word of God from an area where a church hadn't been established and administer the word of God. But Canterbury's actually got more dioceses than York, so it's more important in the Church of England hierarchy. 2 archbishops England, 1 in Wales, only found that out 2 years ago, and the Scottish Church is a little bit more complicated. But the only church bigger than this one in Europe from the Middle Ages, Seville or Sevilla in Spain, York's second biggest in Europe. The biggest church in Britain is actually the Anglican Cathedral in Liverpool, built in the 20th century. It's one of 6 cathedrals in the world, however, with its own police force to look after its stained glass, including the famous west window in front, which has a heart shape round its tracery. 14th century that window, and if you stand beneath it, hold hands and kiss, you're meant to be together for life. But I think it's made up, like some of the ghosts in the pubs, but it's a canny little story. The Five Sisters window is the most spectacular, with the biggest expanse of French grey-green glass, grisaille glass in the world. And the Rose window survived that last major fire of 1984, when the South Transept was struck by lightning. And for 3 hours non-stop, 2 firemen poured cold water onto the red strips in the glass, saving 47,000 individual pieces. Stop number 1, Exhibition Square.
How about that? There's another bus. I don't know where that one's from. Communication problem yet again.
There we are. Right, so if anybody's got questions or you want directions, please just don't forget to use your tickets tomorrow as well.